Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Win the Hour, Win the Day. I am your host, Chris Ward. And today in the house, we have Rosa. It's like Cher. We're just going to call her Rosa. No, that's not Cher.
I like it.
Okay, because she's got a beautifully flowing, elegant name. I'm thinking it's Italian. Is it Italian?
I think it's Spanish. It's Ponce de Leon.
Okay, there we go. Ponce de Leon.
Perfect.
Okay. I just don't have the flowing R's or anything like that. I just knew it was elegant. All right. Rose is in the house. And today we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about leadership. Now, not just a broad thing of leadership, because that's kind of vague. So let's get to the good stuff. We're going to talk about conflict. Now, here's my pet peeve, Rosa. One of my pet peeves all the time is people say something like, oh, you know what? I don't enjoy conflict, or I don't like confronting people. And I think, who jumps up and says, oh, yay, guess what? Today I get to have conflict and, confront somebody on it. Right. So it has to be done. But when done poorly, it's a mess. And when you don't do it, I always say doing nothing is still a choice. Like, you're making a choice by not doing something. That's a decision. That's still a decision. Making no decision is a decision, right?
Right.
So let's just dive in. Let's talk about what are some of the biggest mistakes when people are dealing with conflict. And maybe we need to back up for a second and say, well, let's qualify this with what kind of conflict are we talking about?
I think very simple, confronting issues.
Okay.
Let's keep it at that. If there's an issue that isn't confronted, it requires a little bit of conflict to confront an issue.
Yeah.
And I think people are afraid of the emotions behind it. And I think we're talking about leadership, and leaders who abdicate their role in any area. As a leader, it's on you. You're the leader. You have to take steps and take action where you're needed as a leader. And there are certain things you should not abdicate. You should not phone call them in. You should not delegate certain things. And conflict is one of them, because if you set the example and set the tone in your organization that conflict is a good thing and it can be done correctly, and you can demonstrate how to do that, people will find the value in it. And the value is that these emotional exchanges become very healthy. There's a lot of creativity that results when you confront issues. There's a lot of understanding of each other that happens when we confront issues in a healthy manner. And there's a lot of teamwork that happens, because if I understand you better, I can support you better. And if I fail to ask for understanding and I just assume that I know what happened here and I don't talk to you about it, then it's going to keep happening. And then resentment pops up, confusion pops up, all kinds of things pop up that I created that situation by not acting.
Yeah. And, right away, I'm starting to think of a whole bunch of different examples where one of my favorites is I address every issue there is, because here's the thing. When you do that in a timely and effective manner, not only does the team feel safe because there's no lingering or head games or anything like that, but I'll find more often than not that I miscommunicated something like, oh,
Totally.
So, and I always say to them, I enjoy being wrong. Like, okay, great. I'd rather that I can fix me, and rather than being disappointed in you, I think it's great when you gently point out that, no, this was on you. Oh, okay, great. And recently I had an example of someone on my team, and we were trying to decide between these two platforms that we're going to use for our different courses that we have, right? And I wasn't really thrilled with Teachable. Sorry, Teachable. I wasn't really thrilled with Teachable for a couple of reasons. And I was thinking about going to this other platform. Now, he didn't really like it for a number of reasons. And he's kind of funny. I always say that Evan is much like, it's hard. I have to convince Evan to spend my own money. Like, I always say, Evan, I'm so glad we're not married. But so I was like, I think we need to make the move, and here's why. So a couple of weeks later came back, and then we were adding to this, and I thought we had moved some of the videos over to the new platform. And so I come back to him and I said, you didn't do it. And he goes, Chris, I just couldn't spend your money. I just don't think that's a platform. And let me explain why. He said, I moved a couple of videos over, but it's still in the free capacity. And here's why I still don't think it's good. So I said to him, okay, here's the deal. You should have given me more pushback. He said, well, I told you a little bit. And I said, you didn't push hard enough, because now you moved some videos over there, which somebody had to move. So it was a waste of time. He said, I didn't move them all over, because again, he's waiting to convince me. I'm like, yeah, but still somebody did it. So it was redundancy of work. And I said to him, Evan, your opinion matters. I will listen to you. You have to push back harder. And he does on many things, but in this case, he didn't, because he said, you just seemed like you're really focused on that. And I said, okay, well then say, look, can we come back tomorrow? Because I think you're really focused on this and you're not hearing me. And I really think we need to address this. So you also, I feel, have to equip them with the same skills. Like, as they say, leaders create leaders.
Right. And I think you're hitting on a big point, because he may have been a little bit afraid to confront you. And I think when you throw fear out the window and it becomes clear that none of us are afraid of conflict with one another, whatever conflict we have, it's going to end in a good place, in a good way, then people feel more free to confront. And that's what you want, because I think that's a clear example of he wasn't one way or another. He was namby-pamby about it. It was like, he knew what he wanted to do, but meanwhile, the business is in a holding pattern, and that's not what we want.
Yeah. And the thing is, he had my best interest in mind. And I guess that's another thing. Like, sometimes the word conflict, it just sounds like there's going to be a fallout, a negativity, drama, when it's really, I guess, I'm always about picking language apart. It's really about resolving or minimizing conflict, right? It's really about communication and figuring out, like, as I said to him, I will hear you. If you say, look, I'm going to push back harder than I usually do, and this is uncomfortable for me, even if you say those things, I'll slow down and say, okay, all right, let's, because I know I taught you to say this. I'll have to listen.
Yeah. And sometimes we need that, because we get so focused and we're all so passionate. I mean, I would love to have a team of passionate people. I think we all appreciate people that are self-starters and motivated and want to get things done for you. And those are the kinds of people that sometimes we need to go, hey, pause, let's back up a little bit. And I think until we get each other's attention, we may not have the conversation that we want to have, because we're not listening. And it's just a matter of hitting pause.
Yeah. I'm really big, as you know, about creating what I call your what is next team. And that's part of the fundamentals of how we hire, onboard, and train people. And we really do train them to have ideas, to think, and that it is a safe place, right? And because we rely so heavily on our super toolkits, that more often than not, when there is a discrepancy of any sort, the first thing we look at is the system and go, okay, where did the system not communicate this, right? So people, I find too, are not as in a defensive mode, because they know my problem solving, approaches. So I think that is very different, than a lot of things out there. And especially sometimes I've worked for small business people over the years, and sometimes it can be a little bit more, I don't know, dramatic, because they see the direct correlation of money you're taking out of their pocket. And that's just not how we operate. So you're right. I think it's fear-based is everything. So if you learn to communicate, and I know being direct is one of your passions, but I think that also gets tied up in being rude or blunt.
Totally. And I think that's the biggest fear that people have. And they talk themselves out of that directness. And it's not a good thing to talk yourself out, because when you have to deliver, let's just say bad news or challenging news, just get to the point, because people get confused. They're already feeling like, oh man, I screwed up. There's some emotions tied to that are very natural. Like, either I feel bad for wronging you, or I feel like a failure. I feel like, whatever emotions are going to surface up, they're not going to be happy emotions probably. So we need to be able to get to the point, let those emotions happen. They're going to happen, expect them, welcome them, and let the person have their moment. But if you're dancing around there, you're just creating all this added confusion and anxiety for the person on the receiving end that does not help the situation at all. So you have to be very clear on what is the issue I'm confronting, what is the result that I want, what objective do I have in confronting this issue, what would be my happy place at the end of this. And if you're clear on those things when you come in, that's your responsibility. When you're clear on those things, you're going to set yourself up to succeed in that conversation and to be able to be direct. Hey, Rosa, when this happened, I really felt that this was wrong, because why did you do it that way? I want to know. I want to understand. And it's real simple. And Rosa might go, oh, crap, I didn't even know that happened. Let me think about that. Give me a minute, or whatever I need at that moment. But it gives me a chance to really not be confused and only deal with the natural emotions that I have, not any added stress that you brought in.
Yeah. And that's a really good point too, because what happens then is you find out how they think. Like, even if there's faulty thinking, I'm like, oh, okay, I see. I don't agree with it, but I see how you got there. And I think too is, I know I have a lot of WPMs, words per minute. So I know sometimes I had to work on in the past, when somebody's standing there stammering, trying to get to a point, they think they're trying to tell me something that I won't want to hear. And then of course my mind is racing, because they're going, well, you know how last week, and now I'm just talking quickly in my mind in between their big dramatic gaps, William Shatner gaps. Hello. And so then I know it's rude to say, please talk quicker. What is the point? What are we What is it? But I have had to say to them, and you know, I won't name you all because you know who you are if you're listening to the show. You know, you talk slow. So, and I had to say to him, listen, it's not that I expect you to speak quickly like me, but the dramatic pauses and stammers and stuff just build anxiety even for me. Like, what's the bad news, right? Because then I get to it's like, that was it. That's what you stammered for 30 seconds. Like, oh my gosh, okay, I can deal with that. So it really, even when I, you know, don't work for them, you still have this, like, what's happening? What is it you're so afraid to tell me? So being clear, and I've worked with them on that, and now they get it. Like, because it does take a little bit of confidence, because they do see it as a little bit of rudeness too. And it's like, no, you just have to tell me what's happening now, and we can make a decision to move on.
Yeah, and let's requalify that, because I think the rude thing is the assumed thing that if I'm direct, I'm going to be rude. But the reality is, when you confront someone on an issue that is not working for them or that there's confusion around, it's the most caring thing you can do for them.
Yeah.
Like if you see somebody walking around and their shirt is buttoned offset, right? If you didn't button your shirt correctly and you're walking around all day and no one tells you, you're gonna feel like no one cared enough to tell you, and you walked around that way all day. Somebody speak up and say something, right? It's awkward, but like I needed to hear that, right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to adopt the idea that this is a very caring gesture on my part, and that I should take my time with it and I should do it well for that person.
Yeah. And I think I always say the kindest thing I can give you is the truth and some clarity. And I know someone on my team, and they have been diagnosed with anxiety disorder. And you know, that's a whole nother kettle of fish with, because I always think exercise and stuff can help you there. But anyhow, so
No, it's true.
I thought in the beginning, I'm like, I don't think I'm the place for somebody with anxiety issues, right? Like, I don't think this is where you want to be. And he said to me, no, because you're so clear. There's no head games. Like, I know, like, here's what's happening. Here's why it's happening. And I never have to wonder about your humor. And I also believe too, if there is an issue to be addressed, you address it. It's been addressed. You move on. There's no emotional luggage. There's no, there's no fighting about this later. We're not married. And even if we were, that would be a bad way to handle it. That's, as I used to say to my husband, who moved on to things really quickly, like when the fight was over, and I'd say to him later, I'm still secretly mad at you. Like, he recovered, like he was able to let things go quicker than I was. I said, I'm still secretly mad at you. And he said, well, you're not a secret. Like, it's not a secret. I'm like, okay. You moved on, and I still think you should be sorry. But so that's what I get from my team, is they know, like, I also believe you're responsible for the energy you bring in the room. So they know if there's something to be addressed, I'm not interested in making them feel bad about themselves. That's no one. Right.
I mean, we hired a great person. Either they became bad in our business or something changed, right? So we would hope we could keep people that are great being great. And I want to go back to the issue of anxiety, because people who do struggle or are more prone to anxiety, they do want to talk about things, and they have this buildup that happens inside of them. And as leaders, we have to be willing to hear bad news. And I think sometimes people are afraid to come to us with bad news, or what they think is bad news. It may not even be bad news once we talk about it, but they feel that way. And I think when we project that openness about bad news, that there's no trouble that we can't get through together, let's go ahead and talk about it. I think that for someone who struggles with anxiety, that's a very welcomed situation, because they want to talk, they want to get it out in the open and resolve it.
Now, you are an entrepreneur, and you're doing a wonderful work with all kinds of businesses and leaders, but you have a background that came from a very different experience, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So the funny thing is, so I've been in law enforcement. I'm technically still on the job. I'm looking to retire here in the next 5 years. But the funny thing that I realized early in my career is that as law enforcement professionals, we deal with conflict all the time. But then I looked internally at how we dealt with conflict with each other, and I realized how bad we are at it. so this human tendency of thinking, oh my gosh, conflict is, it's just natural for some people. No, even for some of us that are trained in conflict, it's not easy, because it's that one-on-one relationship, and we have to get real vulnerable with each other and share our emotions around a certain thing. It's hard to say, hey, listen, I feel like you wronged me. I feel hurt by what you did, or I feel like you really let me down, or I feel really disappointed, or I really don't understand this. I have to get vulnerable with you to say that. And I think people think for conflict, you have to be the strong character, and the opposite is actually true. You have to be willing to share where you're hurt and where you're feeling, some very vulnerable thoughts. So I think that's the biggest issue where people might struggle.
That is interesting. That makes so much sense when you say it, because although you're dealing with in law enforcement, the outside world is you're called in only because there's a conflict. Nobody calls you
Right.
because things are going well, right?
Right.
And so you're called in for a conflict, and then it's also so emotionally charged because so many variations of that situation can happen. And then if you feel whatever, somebody didn't serve you or protect you or back you up in a certain way, that moment is past. So it's kind of really hard to, we're not talking about paperwork that I didn't get, right?
Right. No, totally.
So that is very interesting. I know a number of years back, our business took a real, I honestly, I fired a bunch of clients. I was just like, it was after my husband passed away. And I just, I needed to love every moment of every day, 100%. I didn't have it in me to humor people in any capacity anymore, whatever. So we fired a bunch of clients and then we sort of revamped and we're taking a more focused direction. And I know there was somebody in my team that had been with me a while, but we were really, now this is it. I'm not messing around. And we were good before, but now I felt like I was trying to get to the Olympics. And I said to her, look, I helped her with her time management. I wrote a book on it. We worked on some stuff, but she was still kind of struggling. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you. I hope you make the climb, but I'm not sure you will. And I will not sacrifice any aspect of my new vision for anyone, including you. So this is what you have to do. And so it definitely was not a threat. It was, here's where we're going. Kind of like going to the Olympics. Your numbers better be good. You may be the best track star in your region, but here's what I need from you to get, to stay on the team. Right. And she, it didn't beat her up. She didn't feel bad. She's like, okay, I get it now. I hear you. Whatever. And I think it's always shocking to me because I did for a number of years soften that or curtail it or dance around it because I was always told I was so direct and I wasn't sure that was a compliment, but it really does seem to be one of, the better things that serve my business.
It really is. And that's a huge one because as leaders, especially with employee performance, we struggle so much. And I know in law enforcement, I learned this very quickly because when we train a brand new officer out of the academy, we're one-on-one, constant feedback every day. And there's a lot going on and a lot of processing. It's very overwhelming, but you don't have time to dance around it. So you really have to be direct, but it doesn't mean you don't also take into consideration that person and what works for them. So I can be direct, but that directness has different forms. And there's value to knowing who's in front of me. What do they need? Less communication from me and just little stuff and they take it and run with it and they need to go and explore and figure out themselves? Or are they the type of person that needs to sit down with me after that feedback and go, let's set up a plan together? Because there's people that operate very differently. So as leaders, we not only are being direct and then just that's it, we're done, we walk away. No, there's still some follow-up there that we need to be mindful of, whether again it's just stepping back and observing and adding more value where it's needed, or grabbing the person by the hand and going, let's work through this together. There's a lot of options after that.
Yeah. And I think leaders too, I think it might have even been you I was talking to about this, where I have a team and I see it sort of as a circular thing, like we're in this together in the rowboat rowing together. And then I guess, I know one time somebody on the team was struggling with communicating with somebody new. And he said to me, okay, I need to talk to you. I need some more leadership skills. And I thought, oh, I guess I'm a leader. I was like, oh, okay. I never thought of me as a leader. I guess I am, but I guess, I'd like to think I don't want to, I was going to say, I like to think a good leader doesn't even see that they're a leader, but then I was implying I was a good leader, but I didn't see that role there. But what I will say is people get confused when you say, as I always say, having a VA does not make it a team. It's just somebody you're dumping work off. But understand you can have one person or two people working for you. How you start. It's like baby steps. It's how you learn how to, as a toddler, to walk allows you to run. So sometimes people have this idea too, that you're a leader when you have 10, 20 or 30 people.
Yeah, no, I think people, you can choose to be a leader right now in any aspect of your life, right? Yeah. And so you get to decide whether you want to abdicate that role. I go back to that because many people do. They let other externals decide for them what their life should be like. And that's not a leader. That's somebody who defaults to others, the things that are meant to be their own responsibility. So there is no marking or milestone that makes you a leader. For me, I'll tell you a quick story. I was a peer to other officers, and I had gone to a special assignment. And in that special assignment, I was allowed to come to patrol to support some of the staffing issues they were having. And so I was not as well known to everybody. And I was still treating them like a peer, but I was older and more senior, and they saw me as a leader. And so even though I was their peer, technically in rank and by role, the way that I was communicating with them was no longer serving me well, because they saw me in a different capacity. And I had to really step back and own my leadership style and say, you know what, they see me as this, so I need to understand my role has changed. I'm more of a mentor now. I'm more of a guidance person. And I really thank those officers, because they provided me feedback that I just had basically mauled them over with my comments.
Yeah.
The feedback was good, but the delivery sucked. And I needed to know that. And I really thank them for letting me know, because I was able to step back and go, I'm a leader now. I need to understand that. That means that I need to consider others first and deliver the news accordingly.
That makes sense. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. When you could have one person on your team, you're now officially a leader, and you think you're just trying to get through the day. But those, how I always talk to people, onboarding and training, and they were profound legs, getting your sea legs. It's how you start to become a leader. And if you're going to lead, here's the thing, you're making decisions. So you are leading, whether you see yourself as a leader, because we all attribute that to really important and impactful people, but you are the one leading the decision. So I guess, by default, you are the leader. So tell me some other things that you think people just don't pay enough attention to in a leadership role.
I think the biggest thing is that we dismiss little things. If something bothered you, it matters. Talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we think, you have to be curious. Why did that bother you? Right.
Yeah.
And when we dismiss that curiosity, we've overcome a step. Issues reveal something's wrong. And we shouldn't wait till that issue gets stagnant and becomes worse. We should fix it sooner. Leaders address issues quickly. And I think the sooner the better. And so don't dismiss a small issue. Oh, that's just petty. I shouldn't really bring that up. That was just me having a bad day. That was just me being in a bad mood. That was just, well, if it was you being in a bad mood, then let's talk about that. Let's understand why that, jeopardized your relationship with this person. Because ultimately that's really what it's about. We're working with people, and we need to connect, and we need to stay relational. So when you open up and tell somebody, hey, this may seem petty, but this really bothered me because of A, B, and C. And going back to your point that you said earlier, it was probably me. I was the issue. But wouldn't it be great to get the insight from the other person, so that now I'm not just assuming that I'm having a bad day? Maybe they say, no, Rosa, actually, I think you're right. I think you have a point. I still think it wasn't offensive, but here's why I think it wasn't offensive. And now I've got this deeper understanding of the issue, and I don't have to try and resolve it all in my head. Somebody actually added value, someone who's very smart, who I respect, has helped me work through a little issue that now doesn't have to become a bigger issue later down the line.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because like that earlier conversation I had with Evan, where we were talking about the platforms, and he could have stewed over that if he was in a different work environment. Like, I told her twice, I didn't really think that was a good idea. But, then when I come back and say, well, you told me, but you still didn't act upon it. So it wasn't resolved. So you have to stand up tall and make sure it's resolved, that allows you to move forward. So, he could have been like, if we weren't such heavy in the communication, he could have been like, scuffing his all the way home, kicking the dirt, saying, but I told her twice, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, well, all right. I hear you told me twice, and I hear that I didn't listen. So what are we going to do the next time when you think I'm not listening? So I'm willing to say, okay, I didn't listen well. So what's our new strategy when we think I'm not listening well, right? Otherwise that would just stew, and you get victimized. And, like when you have a bad, and when I say a bad fight with your spouse, I mean a poorly strategized fight with your spouse, where you pull and another thing.
Pull no punches. I want to acknowledge something about that example though, because you're giving that person ownership of that project. And if you own that project, you're the leader. You supersede me in that. That's your project. I'm just supporting you. I'm a supportive role in that project. You're the leader. I answer to you in that project. Right. And I think that sometimes get confusing with people, because even though I'm the leader, the owner, the president, whatever, I'm not the owner of every single task.
Right.
If you own it, you own it. I answer to you in some cases. And I think that's a big distinction that sometimes we forget.
I think that's a huge distinction. I didn't see it, and I thought I was, doing everything as well as it could be done. But you're right, because we all know what that feels like when we've had jobs where they said I was in charge, and the last second somebody from whatever department who doesn't even, isn't the end user says we're going to do it this way. It's like, oh, great. Do you even know what that means, right? So even though the lines or the two sides are much closer when we had that discussion, you're right. And if I'm saying you're in charge of that, then I should have listened carefully more quicker, and also bowed down to the fact that you are leading this project, not me. That is
right.
Everybody write that down. Write that down.
And you asked about some of the assumptions. The other assumption that we make when we are going to confront an issue is we assume we know how the person's going to react. We assume they're going to be upset, or we assume, and it could be the person who maybe does have a tendency to get upset with things, but people surprise you sometimes, and it's all in the delivery. Again, if you care enough and people know it, they might have an outburst in the moment, but maybe give them a chance to process, because you had time to process and they're just hearing about it now. And I think even in the worst case scenario where someone might be a little bit more abrasive or irritable, they'll come around if you do it correctly, because they'll know. And how you act after the fact, like even if they outburst and you stay calm and you just give them their space, you're respecting the fact that I'm just dropped a bomb on their plate. Let me have a moment to let them collect themselves. And if you treat them well through that, they will come around and they'll remember how you treated them in their moment.
Yeah, because too, you're putting stuff on them, like the drama, like, which I believe in energy too. So also if you're bringing that into the room, expecting it and building it up in your head, that's one thing. And then the moment they don't handle it as best as they would like to now, if you react, you're just adding fuel to the fire. So I know, I would think of the movie Moneyball. I'd seen it a number of times, and he was teaching the other guy how to fire somebody. Don't beat around the bush. If you're going to get shot, you don't want to be shot in the head and the chest and leg. Just do it, whatever. And so he finally had to fire somebody, and the guy was like, fire somebody, I guess, trade them. He was traded to another team. And the guy's like, oh, okay. And he's like, oh, I was waiting for like big drama and stuff. So it really is, if you just stay true to the course and do it as effectively as you can, it just does everybody a favor.
Right. Yeah. So picture the worst case scenario and just know that whatever the worst case scenario might be, I'm not going to close off. I'm not going to get defensive. It's not about me. I'm going to let the person have their moment. Yeah.
Because the end result is we're all working towards success, especially you guys out there. We're talking, we are, Rosa, like we all have I don't love the word, but a small business, right? We're not talking about large corporations. That's not who we're talking about. So the end goal is for us to have a really effective day, to have fun with who we work with, to have success, to get more work done in less time. So, all this other stuff really would just get in the way, especially when it is such a small team and there is such intimacy. You want this to be a place where people love to work. And I find too, for me, then they really over deliver. Like the team really steps up because they want to do right by me, because they feel I treat them well, and, issues are resolved. It's just, they really overcommit. So you've nowhere to go but up.
Yeah. And I want to point out the fact that listening is such a great quality. And I think all of us are well-intended in listening, but when our team supports us in our defects, if I'm not a great listener at all times, but I know that my team's going to call me out when I'm not being a great listener, that really gives me the freedom to not fret over all that self-improvement and self-growth. Like, I have a team that carries me. I have a team that supports me, that understands my weaknesses, and I don't have to hide them. And I know that when the going gets tough, they're going to add value to my life and to my leadership. And they're totally good with the perks that I get out of leadership, but they're also good with picking up the slack where I fall apart. And that's the beauty of having a full-time team. We talked about having those VAs and those people. We should obviously invest in those relationships as well, because they're people and we want them to be happy in that working relationship that we have. But those team members that you have on board, they really become just a force multiplier for you in your leadership. I think a lot of leaders get overwhelmed. They feel extended. They feel like if it has to be done well, it has to be done by me. But when you invest in your team, oh man, there's nothing like it. It really is a liberating experience because you're free to be you.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I work really hard. I call myself a recovering rushaholic. And from time to time, there'll be times where I know when I rush in, if I overbook myself, then I'm going at a pace that everybody else can't keep up with. And then my tone, it comes out a little sharper than I mean to. So I work on that. And I was doing this training thing with somebody who was on my team, and she was there because that's how we do it. Anyway, that's another story, because you people shouldn't be doing all your training either by yourself. Have them do it for you or with you. But anyhow, so there was some situations involved where I felt after the training was I'm like, I think, and this person was newest on her team and a lovely, much softer human being than the rest of us. And I said to her afterwards, you know what, I think my tone wasn't coming out right. I was asking questions because there had been some frustration with how this onboarding had went with this person that was training us. And so I think I carried that forward, which again, you're talking about, I let that stew, right? And so then I said to someone on my team, I think my tone could have been better. And I honestly was expecting, because she was new, but I trained them to talk to me and each other, and communication be very clear. But I still expected, because she was new, going, oh, no, it was okay, whatever. I was expecting something. And she said, yeah, I think you're right. I was like, oh,
Whoa.
it's like, okay, you're not even going to pretend. I'm like, okay, I did need to hear the truth, but honestly, I was looking for to be felt better, but okay. So, but I'm proud of that. I'm proud that she felt safe to go, yeah, I think you could have done a better job, because I asked her. So it was an emotional low for 30 seconds, but then I was like, look at that. Look at the team I have, that she'll call me out, especially when I ask, right? So it works. Yes. Oh my heavens. Okay. I could talk to you all day, Rosa. Where could people find you? Where should they learn more about your brilliance?
Well, my website has access to everything. You can get social media, my podcast, anything. It's rosaponcedeleon.com. And we're doing a quick little overhaul of it, but nevertheless, all the links are accurate. You can find me there.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to put that in the show links, because I can't even say it. So I'm sure you guys can't spell it, right? So Rosa, you're awesome. And thank you so much. And everyone else, we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Chris.